Welcome back to the Convo Couch, everybody. Pasta Jarduli here. I just want to do a quick sound check as we are getting rolling. We've been having problems with Rumble this morning. We've been having problems with YouTube just in general. I can't believe that we're still on that freaking goddamn platform. I really don't want to be at times, but we can't let the big tech bastards keep us from getting into the public square and getting our message out as much as possible. But once again, we are still close. We're going up to close to 3 years. 3 years now being demonetized on that channel. So if you can do us a favor, if you can go over to Rockfin for $14.99 a month. And how do I sound? Somebody let me know how I sound. $14.99 a month. That will give you our premium subscription. And we have all our premium watchers there right now. So thank you, whoever's there. And of course, you can always watch it for free on Rumble. And sometimes YouTube, when we're not talking about things like elections or COVID, the AM Wake Up Show, in which our guest was on a couple weeks ago. Our AM Wake Up Show, we have a YouTube in which we post clips up. We posted up our clip with Patrick Henningsen. They took it down. They gave us a strike. Medical misinformation, they say. So that was that. But you guys know what you can do. We always will clip up the show, and we will put out the sections for free on Rockfin just to watch the stream. If you can watch the stream in our premium membership, that would really help us out. So let's just jump right to our guest today, because there's a lot of guests that I love to hate, but this guy, but this guy, I hate that I love him, right? That's my problem with this guy. You guys know him. Oh, sorry, excuse me. You guys know him. You guys love him. Gavin Mario Wax is back on the Convo Couch. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing great. It's great to be back on the Convo Couch. Thank you for the nice introduction. I'm looking forward to chatting with you today.
Well, you know me, for quite some time, I've had this little, I don't want to say it's an obsession. I look at it more as like a duty of sorts to make sure that I talk to people different than us. And over the last several years, they've really ingested or injected and really thrusted upon us this cancel culture, where they're telling us that if you talk to people who think differently than you, then you're being misogynistic or you're being racist or you're being whatever. And it seems like the old school plan, Gavin, divide and conquer. So if we stop talking, then we get in trouble. At least that's where I feel we're at right now. I feel that we're all divided. We're looking at our neighbor as the problem instead of looking up. So that's why I enjoy these conversations with you so much. And I think, really, I'm going to just put it out there. I think that you're one of the best at this. I mean, you might be a young person. You might not be doing it for a long time, but you'll get in there with anybody. I appreciate it when you went on Tim Cast after you came off our show. And you said, yeah, I spoke to some lefties the other day called the Convo Couch, and they're just normal people. And I think if we get outside of this whole kind of bubble of sorts, when it comes to the mainstream media and even the independent media now, we would see that a lot of us have a lot more in common than we do different.
Agreed. I think a lot of people are becoming very tribal, and they're not talking, they're not talking substance. They're just talking as if everything's a team sport. And I think if we look, issue by issue, and we just have, open civil discussions, we can find common ground in certain areas and work for the betterment of everyone. But I definitely think there are trend lines politically and culturally that are bringing, say, the populist left and maybe the populist right to find some common ground on a lot of issues. And I think that's a good thing, and I think that's something that certainly the establishment fears in both parties and the international establishment, however you want to describe it.
Well, that's well spoken, and I think it's kind of awesome that you brought up the populist left and the populist right, because the last couple of years, since becoming an election integrity activist, I've had a lot more in common with the populist right. In fact, I've been speaking at election integrity events, the American Project, which, if you don't know, is Patrick Burns and Mr. What's his name? Flynn's brother, General Flynn's brother, and that's who puts on a lot of those events, and they've been having me speak at them. At a solutions panel. And I think it's nothing better when you see me and Patrick Burns together agreeing on elections and how we can get them fixed. However, we do have some differences and disagreements. And what I'm trying to work my way to is that even though I've been agreeing on a lot of issues with the populist right, there seems to be some things that are kind of rearing its little ugly head out that remind me a lot of the George Bush era, in which I think a lot of the populist right is so eager to go to war with China. We had the situation with the Chinese spy balloon, which I don't know why we're calling it a Chinese spy balloon. It was nothing more than a weather balloon. You know, I mean, there's no proof that it was a spy balloon whatsoever, but we've seen balloons like this before. In fact, the grid that that balloon had on it was, I think, was manufactured in the United States, and they've been using it for weather for quite some time. So the fact that we've kind of changed this whole rhetoric, we have guys like Josh Hawley out there who I think were amazing on election integrity. For me to go and say thank you, Josh Hawley, for sticking up for the elections, at least trying to put your nose out there. Thank you, Mr. Josh Hawley, for fighting back against big tech and kind of figuring what Facebook and Twitter and YouTube and all these platforms were sharing information to make sure they censor people as a group together. But Josh Hawley just put forth a bill that said they're going to point the finger at China for COVID, despite all the information we have that we see this is a homegrown virus of sorts, that they've had this type of testing going on in gain of function research for quite some times. We know the connection with EcoHealth Alliance. We know what Dr. Fauci's done, and we've seen patents that were shown by David Dr. Martin for quite some time about getting coronavirus vaccines and whatnot. So my question to you is, Mario, do you mind if I call you Mario? Because
no problem.
Thank you, brother. What are your thoughts on that? Don't you think that when you have guys like Steve Bannon, that everybody he hates or everybody he dislikes or disagrees is works for the CCP? I mean, recently he came out with our boy Matt Gaetz over here and said that Elon Musk works for the Chinese Communist Party. Don't you think that's a little bit dangerous? And doesn't that remind you of Iraq with George W. Bush?
Look, I think there's definitely a lot of currents, even on the populist right, that are definitely beating the war drums against China. My position, I think, still the majority of the position among the populist right is we would not like to see a war with China. We don't want any Americans to die for Taiwan, for example. I don't believe that this is in our national interest. I don't believe it's our national interest to get into a war with China. I think we should stand strong against China when it comes to things like trade. I fully support raising tariffs. I fully support taking measures to protect American industry and labor and to protect our economic interests vis-a-vis China, whether it's their attempts to steal our intellectual property or their attempts to, gut our industry, etc. I mean, those are things I'm happy to discuss, and I think we need to tackle in regards to China, because I do see them as a competitor. But I definitely am fully against any sort of measures that would bring us close to war with China. I think there's a lot of stuff we can do that we're not doing that wouldn't involve anything even close to going to war with China, but that would defend our national sovereignty against China. I know China is buying up a lot of U.S. farmland and other assets domestically. I would limit, purchasing of U.S. land and assets, limit that to U.S. citizens and prevent, the state-run Chinese entities or China as a government from purchasing up U.S. land. I would stop with the visa programs that allow our schools to be flooded with Chinese students, and then who go back and take the education that they got here to benefit China. I would much rather those spots be filled for American students. So there are things I certainly want to implement, and I think I share among the populist right in terms of implementing to sort of combat China in certain avenues, in certain ways, primarily economic. But I do not believe that we should be going to war with China. I do not believe that we should be fighting to defend Taiwan. I don't believe that we should be getting into any sort of conflict in the Pacific region with China. So these are things that I do see some similarities, as you pointed out, with what we saw in the lead up to the war in Iraq. And a lot of these neoconservatives trying to build up this whole war on terror. I definitely see the similarities. I see there is certainly a current and a trend that is trying to turn China into the new enemy. I still see the most even more laughable. But my position remains the same. I'm a non-interventionist. I want to bring troops home. I want to end the overseas interventions, the wars. I think this is a position shared by most right-wing populists, many of whom especially came out of the Ron Paul movement and more libertarian, paleo-libertarian backgrounds, and want to see scaled back foreign intervention, foreign involvement. But that doesn't mean we need to sacrifice completely. There are things we can do domestically to, assert ourselves and not be walked over as a country that I don't think we're doing, which I find it to be ironic that they beat the drum of war, but that they won't do the low hanging fruit. They won't go after a lot of the trade practices and other things that are going on where we're getting the short end of the stick. That's a far more feasible target and focus rather than trying to, build up some kind of military defense of Taiwan. So that's my position, and it is unfortunate that we're seeing some people begin to drift in this mentality, but I guess it's part of the American body politic at this point to always find an international boogeyman when our biggest enemies are here at home.
Yeah. Amen. I wish there was a lot of, leaders within the populist right movement that would say exactly what you said right there about not wanting to get in a war. I mean, you did mention some things that are kind of like that bother me all the time when you talk about the stealing of the intellectual property. I can't understand why a lot of people on the populist right get so mad at China for this stealing of intellectual property, but never finger Israel, who at one point have sold American secrets to China. When you talk about China Gate and some of the Whitney Webb work, they never even talk about this over here. That's why I think it's so biased. And I also like the fact that you pointed out that when it comes to, labor, protecting a labor, I mean, we can go back to NAFTA, right? And we can say, this is when we lost our manufacturing industry. We lost it to China, but it's not like China stole it or took it. The same way they're purchasing land in our country. They're not doing anything nefarious. They're just using our dollars that we gave them from creating every single thing we use in this goddamn fucking country that actually came from China. And that's why they have the dollars and cents to do so. So, amen. Go ahead, buddy. I'm sorry.
And I agree with that. I think, some of these things, it's just trying to take advantage of the situation that we put ourselves in. I mean, we are the ones that are giving them easy hands to deal and to play with, and we should be, fixing our own house before talking about anything in terms of foreign intervention. So you're right. I mean, we were the ones that allowed this sort of regulatory environment to be created where all our jobs would be offshored. We created the sort of legal standard that allowed China to buy up our American land and property, et cetera. So we are our own worst enemy. And China, you can't fault them for acting in their own best interests, for taking advantage of our stupid policies. So to that end, I agree with you. I mean, if I was China, if I was running China, I would be doing the same thing they're doing. I'm not going to fault them for acting on their self-interest. I just want us to act on our own self-interest. And I do agree. I think a lot of people engage in this intellectual property theft. It's not just China, and sometimes it is done through third parties. And that all needs to be handled with, and it needs to be addressed directly. I do think China gets a lot of the attention for a variety of reasons, just given the scale of China, their population, their industry, our trade connections. They do get most of the focus. And I think largely rightly so. But we can't fault them for taking advantage of our own stupidity. I think we need to fix our own stupidity, and then we can, come back to the table and discuss terms. But certainly, I don't want to put us on a war footing with China. I don't think it'll end well for anyone, certainly not humanity as a whole. And I think we can really scale back a lot of the nonsense that's coming out of the State Department and Pentagon, which is not just against China, but they're engaging in color revolutions all over the world. They're engaging in regime change. They're doing all sorts of things that are pushing us closer and closer to really World War III. And we're living in some dangerous times. And it's largely because of the hubris and the stupidity coming out of the Beltway.
I don't know why we don't have more people, leaders in the populist right, that said exactly what you said right there. Amen to every single bit of it. Amen to every single bit of it. And you're right. We are kind of like acting in regime change wars all over the globe. I think it's a kind of like a stretch or a desperate trying to grab all the natural resources that are left, especially the resources of the fourth industrial revolution. And with that being said, let's kind of get into our next little topic over here, because while we're talking about China, I think the fact is that everybody needs a boogeyman, right? And that's something that the populist right, I think they come from the conservative base. They always needed a boogeyman. They needed a boogeyman in Iraq, whether it be Saddam Hussein. They needed a boogeyman and Vladimir Putin to kind of justify what's going on. But now they're looking at the next boogeyman, which is south of the border, which is the cartels, right? What are your thoughts on that? Because I don't know what has changed since Iran-Contra. I thought we already learned this lesson, Gavin. The fact that the CIA and the DEA actually are the capos of the cartels. So if you want to address the cartels and the issue that are going on, you don't go down south of the border into Mexico. You go to Langley. Also, the fact is that we're talking about this fentanyl problem, just like we had with the whole Sackler family and Big Pharma, the opioid problem we had. And I'm not saying that people don't need opioids. There are people out there who have serious migraine headaches, and there's a need for, opioids for some people out there. But you know as well as I do that they created this whole problem, and they created customers. They created addicts. Mm-hmm. And if we're going to be blaming anybody for the fentanyl problem in this country, we should be looking to Big Pharma. So I think our eyes are off the prize. What are your thoughts on that? Because it's kind of scary to me when you see Eye Patch McCain or, what's his name? Fareed Zakaria, you see Mad Dog Matthias, and even 45. Even 45 made this whole thing, well, I'm going to take on the cartels. To me, it seems like just manufacturing consent to do what we've always done, Monroe Doctrine style, go into the global south, go into Latin America, steal their resources, and force the dollar upon them. What are your thoughts on this whole situation where everybody are pointing at the cartels as the problem, not pointing the finger at the doctors?
Look, I agree with a lot of what you said. I mean, I don't know where to start, but let's go through it. I mean, first, yes, the intelligence community and the deep state at large is very much involved in the trafficking of drugs and human trafficking. They have their hands in this pot for sure, and they are a big problem for what's a big reason for what's propelling this problem forward. They are certainly part of it, and they need to be addressed. And I think, we need to take on the intelligence community generally, not just for this issue, but for a whole litany of issues that they've been engaged in, both domestic and foreign. So they're certainly not without their own culpability on this matter. So the intelligence community, absolutely, I agree, they are an issue. Big pharma is one of the most insidious institutions of the modern era. I think, we have to go after big pharma, in all of the above approach, any means necessary. We need to open them up, remove their liability protections. We need to open them up to lawsuits. We need to tackle them from a monopoly standpoint, trust bust them. We need to regulate them more. We need to bring them to heel. I mean, they are an extremely insidious group of international corporate entities that are basically buying up, our entire government from the federal down to the local level, and our media. I mean, if you look at what they're spending in terms of their advertising budgets and their lobbying, they are extremely, extremely insidious, and they are a cartel. They are the largest cartel, and the drugs they're pushing in many cases are far worse than the illegal narcotics that are coming over the southern border. So we can't look at this in just sort of one box versus another box. I mean, we are dealing with a flood of illegal narcotics. In some cases are being, pushed forward by these intelligence agencies. You mentioned the Contra affair, and I think that stuff is still going on, obviously. And then obviously we have the legal, narcotics that are being pushed in America from these, supposedly reputable organizations and companies. So it's a multi-front war, and we have to tackle it. The cartels are part of that problem. I think they're a proxy to some extent, but they need to be tackled. And I'm for all the above approach. If we're going to be able to hit the cartels, hit the cartels. If we're going to go after big pharma, hit big pharma. If we're going to go after the intelligence community, go after the intelligence community. If we can do one over the other in the meantime, get it done. I do like that there has been a narrative shift slightly, even among more mainstream Republicans that are wanting to tackle the cartels, say, before any foreign intervention. We may not like that, but I think that's a healthy move in the right direction. Rather than beating the drum of war against Russia or China, they're saying, well, why don't we focus closer to home and focus on the cartels? I think that's part of the problem. Like you said, it's not the whole problem, but at least we're moving in that direction. And I would also hope it doesn't get used as a backdoor to intervention in the global south, like you mentioned, in Latin America. We don't want any more sort of filibusterism from the old from the 1800s or anything like that, or any kind of CIA interventions. But there are things we can do, and I mean, what we've seen is the deindustrialization of the American heartland. I mean, all the jobs left, all the factories closed, the quality of life decreased rapidly, the cost of living rose, and what filled in its place? It's been drugs, opioids, and it's a massive problem. And they're basically encouraging this through all these different policies and mechanisms. They want a large drugged out population that's dependent, because that's a population that's easy to control. That's a population that's not going to give them problems. That's a population that's not going to ask questions and is not going to be able to stand up on its own 2 feet. So I see the consequences of this to be extremely dire. I mean, these are things that are going to eat at the very bedrock of our society, because you're going to have huge swaths of the country that are impoverished, are buried in debt. They have no prospects, and that's something that's not unique in history. But I do think what's unique in history is that a large number of them are now under the influence of drugs and are addicted. You could look back in history, look at the French Revolution. The peasants were starving, the peasants were impoverished, but were they high? No. And then they went to the streets. So I think there is certainly an element here where you can beat down the people and you can bury them economically, and then when they start to realize how they're getting screwed and how pissed off they are and what bad of a position they're in, then they can't do anything either because they're too focused on their addiction. So it's very insidious. It's very evil. And it needs to be tackled. It needs to be handled. And I think it comes from all these different directions. It comes from the illegal drug flow from the South. It comes from our own homegrown, cartels here under the guise of big pharma. And look at what even the State Department is doing. They're getting very mad at a country like El Salvador for basically hampering the drug flow north. I mean, they're actually enforcing the law to agree. We may disagree on this, but I think the government there has been cracking down on the cartels, and I think it's actually hurting some of the flow of drugs north, and the State Department's up in arms because I think ultimately they want these cartels to run things because they are their proxies to enable the continued flow of narcotics and human trafficking, which is also another area that has been on the rise, and it's absolutely despicable what's happening in terms of the human trafficking crisis in this country and globally. But I'm largely aligned with what you've been saying.
Yeah, that's awesome. I would like to know because I have it here ready. I mean, take a look at this. Because I'm very interested in, I saw this, that you put this up. This is amazing. I love this stuff because, I go down to Latin America and I observe these elections and I'm waiting to get a chance to go down there. And I can tell you from my anti-imperialist leftist friends that Bukele is kind of like a unique situation, right? Like, because they're not crazy about him. They think that, he has not done certain things for certain social programs, but he has taken on the banks. He has taken on the IMF. He's implemented Bitcoin. And now this particular situation over here. But what I want to point out, and this is, you have it up over here, because I think there's been a conversation. Gustavo Petro, the leader of Colombia, just recently attacked Bukele for doing this. And he said, instead of building prisons, we build schools. Yada, 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 whatever. But the thing I want to point out is that I think a lot of people don't realize that MS13, and this is something that Donald Trump used to campaign on, or used to kind of cite a lot, that he was going to take care of MS13, kind of pointing the finger that it's an El Salvadorian gang. No, it started from in the United States during the Clinton administration.
In LA.
In LA, when Bill Clinton pretty much told these people, hey, listen, the deal was you can spend 8 years in our prison or you can go back to El Salvador. And they were like, I'm not from El Salvador. My parents are from El Salvador. And they were like, once again, you can spend 8 years in a prison or you can go back to El Salvador. They went down there. And now he's dealing with a problem on his hand. And not to mention, I think those proxies like the CIA and the DEA funded a lot of these groups and these gangs to keep the place unstable so we can control these governments. And in fact, we have, like, we go back to Iran scandal again, or Iran, what did you call it? Contra what? You called it, not Contra.
Iran-Contra affair?
You called it Contra affair. I always say scandal and not affair because that's where, because I think it's a scandal no matter what. But there was the CIA and the State Department and all these other NGOs, which are just CIA light, that were funneling money to a lot of these gangs and these groups to keep these regions unstable, especially Nicaragua. They wanted to send these people into Nicaragua to fuck with them hardcore because they hate Daniel Ortega and the Sandinistas. How do we address this problem right here, Gavin? Because I think we're on the same page, because this is something I kind of have the conversations with my populist right friends when they say we need to close the border, we need to defend the border. I say, well, wait, both Democrats and Republicans are talking about the border. That's a distraction. The causality of migration is the fact that we go into these countries and we keep them so disabled. So we can go in there, we can extract their resources, we can thrust IMF loans on them. How do we swing the mode and say, hey, let's look at our immigration problem of what's actually going on with our foreign policy in Latin America?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think you could approach it from both ways. I think we need border security, but I also think, the problem is going to persist unless we address the root of it all. And I do think this instability in these Central and South American nations are the main contributing factor to this massive human migration north. I think most of these people would love to stay in their own countries, but they're forced to leave due to violence, due to instability, due to economic destitution. And that's why it's refreshing to see a leader like Bukele really try to turn his country around. I mean, if you had told anyone a few years ago that El Salvador would be one of the safest countries, I think the safest country in the Americas, they would have called you crazy. I mean, this was a country that was a narco state. It was 100% run by these cartels, these gangs, and he smashed them. He squashed them in a very short period of time. and now he can focus on a whole litany of other issues like, taking on the banks, bringing Bitcoin, other ways to develop the country. You couldn't even get to that point before because you were too worried about getting shot or killed any given day. And you get these criticism from these politicians in Colombia saying, "Oh, we built schools, not prisons." I mean, it's such a phony, artificial response. You could do both. You could walk and chew gum at the same time. To say that you built a prison, it somehow precludes you from building a school is just it's so asinine. It's so asinine. And it completely ignores how bad the problem of criminality and violence was in El Salvador, and how the people there were completely held hostage by MS13. And it was a big problem here in New York on Long Island growing up. I mean, I remember working in diners and restaurants, and the vast majority of the staff I worked with were Salvadoran. And I even worked with a busboy once, and he was killed by MS13 for some money he may have owed them or something or other. So it was a massive problem in El Salvador. It was a massive problem in the U.S., and they preyed on innocent Salvadorans in El Salvador and in the United States, and they were a big issue. I do think that the State Department and the intelligence community were behind them to a degree. I do think they used them to destabilize these countries. But I do agree with you. We need to address the root cause, and I think we need to see more Bukeles emerge across Latin America. And I don't think he fits perfectly into a left-right paradigm. I think he has some elements of him are more left, some elements of him are more right. But I think ultimately what makes him great, what makes him unique, is that he's able to address the issues pragmatically from the interest of his own people. And that's who he's looking out for. And I think he's doing an amazing job there. And all you have to do is look at the criticism and who is criticizing him, because it's all the worst entities in society that are going after him. It's all the worst entities in the mainstream media, in our government, that are going after him. And that tells you all you need to know, that if he's on the right side of history or not. But look, I think the foreign policy of the United States, this neo-Monroe doctrine, is not designed, obviously, to keep Europeans or colonialists out of the Americas anymore, as unique as it was and how beneficial the Monroe doctrine was when it first was implemented. Now it's basically designed to create the instability, to push the regime change across Latin America, which we've been doing for the better part of 3 generations. And obviously our focuses have changed. It's not anti-communist anymore, at least not under that guise. Now I think it's being moved in a direction to continue to facilitate these avenues of human trafficking and drug trafficking. And I think it's disgusting. I think it's insidious. And it just goes to show it's another element of our federal government just being involved in things that should not be involved in, and promoting things that are frankly completely immoral and repugnant. And I do think we need to return to a situation where there isn't a brain drain from Latin America, where they're young and their most productive are not leaving these countries to come to the United States. If I was a leader of one of these nations, I wouldn't want to see a huge chunk of my population emigrating. That's not going to do anything good for that country. To be living off remittances is not a healthy long-term economic strategy. So we definitely need to look into ways to allow these countries to stabilize and develop internally, and that's the only way we're really going to stop massive migration from occurring, both legal and illegal. I think we could tackle it from both ways. I think we can enforce our laws and protect the border, but we also can look into means to help stabilize these countries and encourage leaders like Bukele to do it, rather than criticize him and turn him into some kind of international pariah.
I think the best way to stabilize those whole regions is to just get the hell out, stop messing in their business and stuff. We have 83 bases in Latin America, and I can assure you, they're not the Boy Scouts down there. They're there to make sure that these corporations extract these resources, and we throw our monetary system on there. But how would you then, in fact, if you were the president, and how would you handle the cartels without going into Mexico or doing anything like that? Or would you think it's okay? Do you think it's all right to actually send American troops into Mexico, despite AMLO saying, hey, cut this shit out, don't even come near here, we're a sovereign nation, you can't come in here and do a business?
I wouldn't violate Mexico's sovereignty. No, that wouldn't be the first thing I would think of. I mean, I would tackle it domestically. I mean, there's plenty of cartel influence within our own borders that we can tackle and we can stop and we can create an environment where people aren't dependent on drugs. I mean, I think, like you said, look at the causality, look at what drives the migration, look at what drives the demand for drugs. I think we can look at that issue. And I think a lot of that comes back to the economic and cultural destitution in the United States that's creating a massive market for these drugs. I would enforce our border. And I would tackle the cartels as they exist within our own borders. I think those are the low-hanging fruit we should be going after before, bombastically going into Mexico. I think we can work with the Mexican government, who obviously have an incentive to see these cartels eradicated and rule of law brought back to many of these different regions in Mexico. So we can work together as partners, as neighbors, as allies. But I don't think we should be invading Mexico to do that. Right now, there's plenty of things we're not doing that could dramatically reduce the demand for drugs and the influence of cartels, and we're not doing it. So I don't think we need an excuse for foreign intervention. I think we need to focus on domestically intervening against these various causes that are driving this this pandemic of addiction.
Fam, you missed it. We're going to try to get Gavin Mario Wax to run for as a populist conservative, because he's the best that I've ever heard. He's every single issue over here. He agrees with us too much, and it's hard because I brought him over here so I can pick a fight, and it's not working. That's why I say I hate to love this guy, but I do love him and stuff, fam. You have any questions for our man before we get to the bank part?
No, go ahead. I didn't get to hear everything before, so.
It was some good stuff. And Mario, I don't know if you remember Fiorella, Mario, back on the show. Gavin, but I call him Mario because I want to use the Italian name, fam. You know me. So we first had you on the show right after they had the reboot of the kind of Occupy Wall Street. It was after Wall Street Bets, the whole scandal with that situation, which nobody went to jail. Nobody paid a price for it. I mean, I don't know how they can just turn off their services and not allow people to buy or sell a stock. I think they were allowing people to sell a stock. They weren't allowing people to buy a stock to continue to drive the price up. And then when they turned it off, they were able to recoup some of their losses. And yet nobody went to jail. Nobody got in trouble. But what that showed me more than anything is that what we're under is nothing more than a giant Ponzi scheme, that the game is fixed. The rules are unfair. Do you see with the SVB bank now starting to kind of fall apart, when we had a run on banks, and we heard that it was JP Morgan that had advised a lot of their tech companies and their tech startups to pull their money and they actually started the run on the banks. With this crashings of the banks over these last several days, is this more of the same? It's just a big giant Ponzi scheme and the house full of cards falling down. I know you're not a finance expert, but I would love to hear your opinions on this.
Yeah, I mean, look, our banking industry is a mess, and I do think it's a giant Ponzi scheme. I mean, there's so many ways to look at it, from the fractional reserve component to the Fed to just the cartelization of the banking industry. I mean, it's like you don't even have small community banks anymore. It's not like I could go out and start a bank. It's almost impossible. But these large banks are allowed to create these bigger and larger monopolies and conglomerates and totally dominate the industry. And they're creating when one falls, the whole thing collapses because there's not enough of a strong foundation there with a multitude of different local healthy banks. Rather, it's a few regional players, a few national, international players, and they're all completely intertwined. I mean, the whole system is just so utterly broken, and everything we're doing is just a patchwork of things that we're slapping on just to keep the thing afloat for another few years, because no one wants to see the inevitable. But the whole thing is inherently the way it's structured now. It's always going to create this situation with these bank runs, and every few years having a financial crisis, even a monetary crisis. And like you said, no one gets punished. No one gets punished for the types of activities they're engaged in, the fraud, the outright theft in many cases, and the risk that they're creating through this strange partnership between the government and these banks. I mean, it's very much a gray area, where one institution starts and the other one ends. It's all sort of one giant, big blob of a corporate government financial entity. And it's just creating instability in the economy. And every time we go through these periods of instability, a bunch of people on the lower to medium side medium rung of the economic tier, they lose out, and then the tippy top continues to consolidate their wealth and their income and their power, because it almost seems like it's like a flash. It's like a fire sale. The entire economy collapses. They gobble up everything else, and we go through this every few years. And then the system becomes more and more, tipped in their favor. And we saw this during COVID as well, with certain individuals and organizations accumulating a ton of wealth at the expense of, say, small business owners and the bulk of working and middle class people. And now we're seeing it again with these banking collapses. And then you're going to see, I'm sure, a lot of, Signature Bank collapsed in New York, and I know a lot of small landlords use them. I'm sure all their assets are going to be gobbled up by BlackRock, whoever else. So it just goes to show that it's part of this recurring theme of economic or social or political upheaval and instability, and then everything is consolidated in terms of power and wealth in fewer and fewer people and entities. And this just seems to be the latest round of it. And until we get serious institutional reform, which is going to hurt, it's going to hurt in the short term. There's no easy way to fix this without drastic, radical reform of our entire banking and financial system. It's just going to continue to perpetuate until a point where it's no longer sustainable and everything goes belly up.
He says, go ahead, fam.
Well, you talk about reform. Like, I want to know what do you think are the solutions to this? Because as you mentioned, and you're absolutely right, it keeps happening over and over again, and the same people keep getting away from it. The former CFO of Lehman Brothers is also at the helm this time around. It's always the same people, the same manipulators, and what we see is it just keeps getting worse each time. And I'm not really a reformist, so I'm just like. But let's, for practicality reasons, let's see what do you think are a solution to this? Is it possible to reform this under the system, or what could be done? Because it does seem like this is almost on purpose every single time, a sort of manufactured crisis to try to get the entire public dependent on the, not like the government, but like a government that is also not really providing, in a system that is just enslaving them to a degree, to a certain way and a certain structure. So what could possibly be any sort of solution?
I mean, look, we could talk hypothetical and we could talk about what I really think. I don't think there is going to be a solution anytime soon. I think everything's just going to have to collapse and reset. But if we want to talk just purely hypothetical in terms of policies, I mean, look, I think some people should go to jail. I think you need to send a message. So I think that's a baseline. I mean, enforce some of the laws that already exist that they've clearly broken and violate. I mean, that's easy. That's a small thing. But I mean, look, it would be great not to have fractional reserve banking, where you're basically creating money out of thin air. It'd be nice not to have, the Federal Reserve basically controlling interest rates and dictating the entire monetary system. It would be nice to have a system where you could start a local bank without all the certain regulatory hurdles. You could start some kind of local financial institution outside of these conglomerates and these monopolies, and allowing, a healthier, more diverse system to exist. I'm not a finance guy. This is not my strongest suit, but I do know the current system is a mess, and it's creating these circumstances. We are in this sort of business cycle that we can't seem to break. And I think a lot of it comes down to, the Fed's policies. I think it comes down to the regulatory environment we've created. And all these rules and laws and systems and institutions were designed by the bankers. They were designed by the people they're meant to contain. So I think it goes back to, again, we have this very incestuous relationship between big finance and the federal government. And it was designed this way. I think it's operating largely as intended. And, the only way I see it fully collapsing is some, radical change that happens politically, or a radical, economic collapse that forces society to change it. I mean, we can do things on the margins. If we had if we had any kind of a national consensus, if we had a strong enough government that was willing to attempt this. We don't have that. I don't see us getting that anytime soon. So really, I mean, the things we would do on the margins would be minimal. They could help in the short term. They can minimize some of the risk and some of the fallout from these systemic, and recurring collapses of the system. But I don't see, any political appetite to do that from either party. Both parties seem fully in bed with this current this current circus, and it's going to continue. And a lot of people are going to get the short of the stick, and a lot of people are going to make off like kings, which we've seen happen time and time again.
So with this situation over here, as well as what happened with Samuel Bankman-Fried and FTX, at the end of the day, they have these congressional hearings, and they seem to the answer seems to be more regulations, and it seems like to be a lot of regulations are coming on crypto. Do you believe there is a war on cryptocurrencies, and what are they trying to achieve? Is it, at the end of the day, is it all about moving people into these central bank digital currencies? Is that what they want, and try to crush the other cryptocurrency platforms like Bitcoin that are competing directly with the US dollar?
Absolutely. I mean, they certainly want to regulate crypto, and they want to scapegoat crypto, and they want to create a situation where, they're moving away from real cryptocurrencies and into these, glorified government tokens. So that this is all part of that. It's narrative formation that they're engaged in, and the more they regulate, the worse things seem to get. And I'm not saying there isn't a time and place for certain regulations, but most of these regulations are they come out of rent seeking. They come out of the same people that are trying to perpetuate the system, getting involved in the government, and it's this revolving door. And they're creating a situation where those that are already at the table are protected and entrenched politically and economically, and they continue to basically push forward with the status quo, and nothing really seems to change. I mean, we've had plenty of reforms and regulations over the years, and nothing's gotten better. But with crypto, I think crypto has posed the biggest threat to this system, and I think that's what makes it revolutionary and a massive threat to them. So of course, now they're going to they're going to frame this in the way that crypto is responsible for a whole litany of financial ills and issues, and they'll use it as a pretense to get Uncle Sam to get involved. I think right now, though, there's such a large enough following and support for crypto that crosses partisan lines that it's going to be very difficult for them to do this. It's becoming too mainstream, it's becoming too widespread, and just the very nature of it from a technology standpoint is going to make it very difficult for them to do what they would really want to do, which is either shut it down or control it. But I think to the earlier question, what are the reforms? I think things coming outside of the system, like crypto, are probably going to be our best bet and best avenue to, protecting ourselves from the sort of, the contagion and the financial risk that is inherent with our current system.
Pam?
And I guess just the last comment sort of question I have is, what, in your opinion, do you recommend for people to do during a time like this? Because it's such a time of uncertainty. People could lose a ton of money. There have been obviously people saying, take your money out, have cash out, have investments, diversify your assets in different, don't put all your eggs in one basket, perhaps invest in gold and like other crypto, as we mentioned, cryptocurrencies. But is there anything else you can do? I mean, you talked about being outside the system. It's actually, I think, something that everybody should be doing, especially since the last few years that we've seen how everything has gone downhill, as well as growing your own food and doing certain things to be proactive. But what are other suggestions that you think you would do?
I mean, I remember a lot of this talk, way back when people were pushing gold a lot and silver, and there was always going to be hyperinflation any day. And look, that could still happen. I think ultimately, history shows, tangible things, tangible assets, investing in yourself in skill sets, being able to grow your own food, for example. All these sort of things are going to help. I don't think there's any easy answer. I think we're all in one way or another going to be impacted by this. Our quality of life is going to go down. Our purchasing power is going to go down. We're not going to be able to completely isolate ourselves fully, but we can do things to help mitigate, to help hedge that. And I think it's ultimately going to come down to putting your assets into things that are tangible and real and hard assets. But that's not even something that everyone can do. Not everyone can go and just buy land or buy a house. Some people can do that, and if they can, great. But there are many those that can't. I mean, most people live paycheck to paycheck. Most people don't have savings. Most people, they're drowned in debt anyway. And maybe for them it may be a good way to reset. So maybe there are silver linings if the whole system collapses. Maybe that debt goes wiped with it. But they never wipe the debt for those at the bottom who are drowned in it. Those for the people at the top that get their mistakes, washed away. And that's the problem. And then sometimes they hide behind the banner of capitalism. I'm going off on a tangent here, but they hide behind the banner of capitalism. And it's privatized gains and nationalized losses. I forgot who said that, but I remember it came up in one of the original Occupy Wall Streets. And that's what we've seen time and time again. It's a rigged system where you can be as risky as possible and you'll be protected and shielded from those risks. And you'll get to, reap the benefit in the short term. And then when things come home to roost, then you'll be bailed out and protected. But we've created so much systemic risk. I mean, even, I understand that the FDIC on paper is a good thing to protect depositors, but it creates this sort of moral hazard that allows these institutions to operate in a certain way that is risky and detrimental to their depositors. And then again, you go back to fractional reserve banking and how they're just creating money out of thin air. You loan $1 and, $5, $10, $20 or you deposit $1 and like $20 are loaned out on top of that. I mean, all these things, they're just trying to create easy credit, easy money. And it's just creating moral hazard and all these systemic risks that are just making the system inherently unstable. And you could look throughout American financial history, all the different crashes and bubbles going back to the 1800s. All of it could be tied back one way or another to, central banking prior to the Federal Reserve or the Federal Reserve itself, and the regulatory and fiscal environment that the feds create, either under the auspices of protecting, or promoting financial stability or whatever. All of them have just made things worse, and we've basically refused to take the medicine we need to take, and we've pushed off what's ultimately going to be a really hard, strong collapse, or more realistically, and that scenario would probably be some kind of hyperinflation type of scenario, or what I think is more realistic is we're just going to enter into multi-generational stagnation economically. I mean, there will just be no growth. We'll just kind of be in this flat line economically, where the old adage of one generation surpassing the last is just going to go into the trash bin of history, and we're just going to enter into this sort of malaise economically. I think they're trying to make sure that happens because that's a lot more palpable than a sudden rapid collapse and hyperinflationary scenario, which would lead to a whole litany of political consequences. But I think just a prolonged economic malaise is probably where we're heading. And it's just going to sort of resemble some kind of new technocratic serfdom where you have the haves and the have-nots, and there's a few people living at the tippy top of society, and the rest of people are barely scraping by. And we see parts of the country are actually like this now. I mean, look at the Bay Area, look at San Francisco. You have these tech oligarchs at the very tippy top, and then you have a mass of people who are barely scraping by. I think that's going to be what spreads out to the entire United States if this sort of stuff continues, and that's really sad.
He said, grow your own food, participate in mutual aid, blow the system up. He sounds like a communist Marxist over here. I love him, Gavin Mario Wax. Ladies and gentlemen, just messing with you, Gavin, but please let everybody know where they can find you. And thank you so much for coming on this show and having these conversations. Really, to tell you the truth, I wish there was a lot more leaders in the populist right that sounded like you. I think you are the future of the movement and the party. Hopefully, maybe, who knows? But then again, I would get away from these parties altogether because I believe they are one party, one uniparty, and there's no way of reforming it. I even said the other day on the anti-war rally that I was at, I was like, thank you, Matt Gaetz, for floating a bill to end the Ukraine war. Personally, I think a little bit too late. 250,000 people dead, and a lot of money spent. But hey, I welcome it, but I don't think in any way, shape, or form that we're going to sit back and allow them to end the proxy war in Kiev with Moscow and go over to Taiwan and have a proxy war with Beijing. And unfortunately, I think there's too many people within the conservative movement and the populist right movement that are okay with that. You have spoken against that, and that's why I was very happy that you did so. Please let everybody know where they can find you.
Well, thank you, guys. I really want to talk Russia, Ukraine next time I'm on because that's the topic we didn't touch on, and it's something I've been following you guys on, and it's been infuriating me, and I've gotten a lot of flack for it. But anyway, you can follow me at Gavin Wax, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all the rest. And I will be having a new book coming out, which I think you guys would appreciate, called The Emerging Populist Majority, which touches on some of the stuff we talked about today, some of the political currents and trends culturally as well that are happening in the country that, could be a white pill, could be positive going forward. I want to stay positive. We can't be nihilistic, and we got to approach it from all avenues, political or otherwise, even though we are up against a machine here, and it sometimes can be disheartening. I do think there's a lot of common ground we could advance even on the margins to make people's lives even a little bit better if we can. So grow potatoes.
Grow potatoes.
Totally agree.
Grow potatoes and make bullets, right? Gavin Mario Wax, for ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining the show, brother.
Thank
you.
Fam.
How
you doing? Fam.
I think did you guys see this tweet? I don't think you guys, I saw Pasta get in a fight with somebody and you were defending on Twitter. You were like shutting them down because they were saying stupid stuff about Marxism, and you were like, it's about the proletariat. And so I shared it with our group of anti-imperialist friends. I said, guys, it's happened. Comrade Pastro. So yeah, it's funny.
That true?
Gavin, there's hope in Gavin. I really do think, like, he's actually better than some libertarians, to be honest. No offense to your libertarian friends, but I mean, in terms of the solutions he provides, I think, like outside of the labels situation, I think that's something one could work with, and I would prefer that 1,000 times over any sort of what I'm looking at right now. DeSantis, a lot of people, have been talking about DeSantis, and he's just not it, guys. He really isn't. He's a neocon. And I tell this to the Russians, I tell this to everybody, because a lot of them don't understand, like, the dynamics of American politics. And this morning I was on fault lines this morning for you guys, not for me. And we talked about what's going on in Georgia, but before that, Manila Chan was talking about DeSantis and, like where he's losing some people and stuff. And I just don't really see any hope on the two-party system at all. We don't have fair elections. I don't want to promote anybody as any candidate because we just don't have fair elections, whether it's Jimmy Dore or anybody else. Like, I just don't, so anyway.
Yeah, it's a very complicated situation when it comes to, I mean, he's awesome. He a lot of great things he was talking about. And I wish, a lot more people in that movement and he's in, that party is in, would feel the same way. I mean, we opened up with talking about China, and he was just right on the money with that situation. He doesn't want a war with China whatsoever. And he says there's other ways we can handle this situation, not flirting with war with China. And he just made some great points. And a lot of it came to, cleaning our own house, taking care of our own shit. We're the ones who, created NAFTA and sent our whole manufacturing industry over there, so a bunch of oligarchs can make more money off cheap labor. That was us who did it to us. They're just using our dollar, buying up their lands. They're not doing anything illegal. They're taking their assets and everything they've created and everything they've gained from our misfortunes and the way we've screwed over labor in this country, and they're just making it work for them. So I think a lot of the, he said he's for tariffs. I don't know if I'm that far, but I would like to definitely just start pulling out all these bases and closing them down. He even agreed to the causality, fam, of migration and knowing and understanding what we do in these other countries. So there's a lot there and a lot of things we can build on together. That's why I wanted to have him back on the show. Me, fam, I am, Pastro. I am committed to talking to people who think differently than me. I still consider myself to be a leftist. If that's what you want to say, what does that even mean? Definitely not an American leftist. But I just think it's great when we have these conversations, and he's always been a stand-up guy and pretty swell. We had a conversation on the morning show with him about a month and a half ago, and we talked about him and his choice about going with Donald Trump and why he thought it was the lesser of two evils. I wasn't crazy about that particular argument or statement he had. I still thought seeking outside the two-party duopoly is the most important thing we can do right now, getting away from the Republican and Democrats because they are just one team, WWE style. But it was just an intriguing conversation. And I want to thank everybody who joined in today and everybody's been helping out with our Patreon, our Rockfin membership and over on Rumble and holding it down. And of course, for those of you who are hanging on YouTube, please do us a favor, like, share, subscribe. We're getting smacked and beat down in every single step of the way, but we're going to try to pass through the suppression, pass through the oppression, whatever you want to call it, and still continue to do our work. And we can only do it with your help. And you guys have been amazing. So thank you very much, everybody, from the bottom of my heart. Fam, guess who is in Russia?
Right. So, President Bashar al-Assad is
you Assad toady
Moscow. Yeah. If you want to call me that, I respect that the people of Syria chose Bashar al-Assad as our president, and I respect that the people of Syria don't want the U.S. to intervene, which is why they chose him, and they, they have such respect for him. And you can talk to Vanessa Beeley any day and really understand that that's how people feel. So Bashar al-Assad came into Moscow. He came in a motorcade, and he came in to talk to President Vladimir Putin. And we've been covering it all day on RT. Basically, the point of the talks was going to be centered on two main things. One, how to build their economic relationship while circumventing U.S. sanctions, which both countries are enduring. And the second one was what to do about the Syrian crisis, especially that obviously under the current circumstances where Syria lost 4,000 people to this past earthquake or set of aftershocks as well. 4,000 buildings were either destroyed or entirely damaged. This is a country that has been not in like a good economic state before that. So now that happened. It made things worse, not to mention the fact that no Western country was allowing them to receive aid because of the restrictions due to the sanctions. But Russia was able to send a lot of aid, several tons of food, and just humanitarian aid in general, actual humanitarian aid. Like, they weren't trying to overthrow like the government. And, because there's a difference when you're actually like, hey, here's some food, here's some stuff. I'm not going to try to overthrow or coup your president. So that happened. So this is a very good meeting. Why? Well, because again, we're seeing this emerging multipolarity, and whatever you want to call it, if you don't like the name multipolarity, whatever, we're shifting away from that Western dominated system. And you can see here when he arrived, and he was very much welcomed in Russia. And today, for the first time, really, I've been seeing sun here on and off, but for the first time, there was a lot of sun out. The snow is melting. Maybe, just maybe, I'll be seeing hints of spring. Okay. Like, I've been waiting for this moment. I'm over here waiting for really hot weather, guys. Like, I'm ready to be outside. I'm a sun person. This has been difficult for me, but you got to do what you got to do. And the Russians have vodka, and the Russians have Russians. So it's been great. But Syrian President Bashar al-Assad visited the famous Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. This is a famous tomb. It's a memorial to the Soviet troops that were killed during World War II. And you can see several memorials when you walk around the city. And so Assad is here, like I said, bilateral cooperation in various fields, and of course the sanctions and the Syrian crisis. So I have some pictures I actually just got. You can play the video. I'm going to put some of these pictures up in the doc so we can see him and Putin actually together. And that is at Red Square. So that's at the center of Moscow. It's like 15 minutes from my house. Like, crazy. But I was busy. I literally, when that was happening, I was literally at RT. So we had our correspondent cover it. Steve Sweeney was on the ground there. So there's Putin.
Dude just walks like a pimp.
Da 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 da. Do 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 do.
I mean, you got ding,
Short king, short king.
ding, ding, ding. But I mean, like, compared to our president who can't even freaking stand up, it's just ridiculous at this point. I mean, Jesus.
I
Man.
didn't put it in the doc, but did you see
I got it.
Biden like literally running away? Like,
Yeah,
and he
yeah.
was asked,
Yeah.
he was like, so there's a couple more pictures of them sitting together. Notice, I actually do believe in this sort of thing where you can tell by people's like physical positions and stuff. When you see the table between like Beijing and somebody from the West, like huge separation. When you see Russia and Syria, or Russia and China, it's a little bit different. That it's just different. So yeah, so I'll get more updates about exactly how it went down. I don't have all the updates, but I know for a fact that that's what basically it was focused on those specific issues. And there was also, I think, a press conference. But yeah, and I think again, this is a big deal happening on the heels of what's going on with China, mitigating this renewed relationship between Saudi Arabia and Iran, what's going on with also the United States and NATO trying to instigate stuff on a new front in Georgia, what's going on economically in Europe, and Seymour Hersh's latest revelation, basically just saying, just kind of building up on what he said about the pipelines and everything that's been happening. I think there's so much information being revealed, and yeah, we'll see what happens. I mean, I do see this as an emerging new multipolar era, and a lot of people are saying that, and it's become like this new catchphrase, but really like just sort of like more relations being built with Africa, with Latin America, with the East, and de-dollarization. And something Gavin mentioned that I think is absolutely critical is that, and I was surprised that he said this, like, there has to be like a fall. There is no way to reform this, and I 100% agree with him. You guys know I'm not a reformist, right? I'm not a capitalist, but I'm also not a reformist, meaning in terms of where we are right now, I do believe some countries can reform things. I do believe there's some advances that can be made in like Africa and Latin America. But in terms of the United States, we live in the belly of the beast. We live in the empire. And I just don't see how we can reform the system. So I do think it has to collapse. And I think what we're seeing is the slow collapse and the slow decline of the empire.
Yeah, the controlled demolition of the empire. But everybody knows you're a Marxist fam. You want to just blow it up and start something new.
That's not, but he said it. He didn't say he wanted to blow it up, but he said, I mean, it does seem like it has to fall. And once something falls, it's gonna suck.
He wants it to fall naturally, right? You want to blow it up right now before it gets any.
Well, I don't want to blow anything up, Pasta, but like, I mean, I think
Not the Nord Stream 2
already
pipeline?
self-imploding.
Yeah.
It's self-imploding.
I know. I said, what about the Nord Stream 2 pipeline? You don't want to blow that up?
If I had dragons, then yes, things would be different. But I don't have dragons, so DC
you don't have dragons yet.
Yet.
Fee might get dragons. Be careful, everybody. Guys, thank you so much for doing what you're doing. Thank you for helping us on out. We do have a Super Ray. We have 2 Super Rays. 2 of them just came in. Right now, Dominic Paella, or Paella, but I think it's Dominic Paella, fam, because he's a paisan. Don't try to win arguments with people who have a political ideology different from yours. It's what keeps us divided by politicians. They want to distract us from the one thing all voters have in common. It's not having a voice in government after elections. Learn how constituent polling can unite us to be directly involved in government decisions after elections. And that's constituentpolling.org. You can go to independentvoterparty.org if you want to go check it out, guys. But thank you so much. I'll take a look at that later. Yeah, fam.
I have some updates on the Putin-Assad meeting.
Yes.
I put it in the doc at the bottom of that section. So Putin and Assad met for 3 hours, which is typical, I think, of somebody of that stature. and the talks just ended at 8 p.m. Moscow time. So it's 10 o'clock, 10:21 now. So they just ended. And they started at 5 Moscow time. And let's see, they talked about further development of Russian-Syrian cooperation in politics, trade, economic, and humanitarian areas, as well as the situation around Syria. This is going to kick in a new phase between the two countries. And let's see what else.
That's it.
I believe that's it. I think we're going to have more updates in the morning once they start releasing all of this to us, the media, and they'll release the details. So we're probably going to talk about that in the morning, which is going to be very soon for me. So it'll be good. We'll get some updates. In fact, RT will probably have some updates tonight. So yeah, I'll be keeping you guys posted. I think that's an important talk. Also, Lavrov is going to be making his way in the next weeks, or maybe even in next month, into Latin America as well. So that's another important update that's happening.
That's awesome. I'm very interested. We talked about this, and I assume that we'll see a lot of Latin American countries in Syria trying to help out. Venezuela will probably be one of those countries. Nicaragua probably be one of those countries. Some alliances where they can come on in because they've gotten some help. I mean, Venezuela has a line of food stores that are Iranian owned, so from Iran coming in there and helping them out, I think you're gonna see one hand helps the other, or one, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours, and we might see some Latin American involvement in Syria and helping it rebuild once we can get the fucking U.S. out for good, if we could get them out. But then there's also the problem, fam, of Israel. What are you gonna do?
Yeah, and that is something Russia's gonna have to deal with, by the way, because Russia has been pretty neutral with Israel. They've been trying to supposedly maintain peace in the region, but a lot of us feel like Russia has to make that decision very soon. So
Fam, I do have one more. Super Ray, really. Yeah, by Roar Media says, great show today. Glad to see everyone on Rockfin and Rumble. No more government corporate censorship by YouTube. And she also says, and I think this is either Franklin or Amber. Nice hair day, Pasta. Thank you.
Probably Franklin. I don't know if it's Amber's style.
Probably Amber. But
hey,
let's get
Franklin.
to it. What do we got over here?
So this is the other big thing that happened. So the Pentagon, the U.S. had this little drone going around Russia's border near the Black Sea. Okay, I mean, guys. So we went from weather balloons to drones around Russia's border, but it gets kind of crazy. So the Pentagon confirmed that a U.S. drone was intercepted and forced down over the Black Sea, and they say it was on a reconnaissance mission, but they didn't specify if it was armed or not. They refused to answer that question. And according to Russia's defense ministry, after this abrupt maneuvering, the drone went into, quote, an unguided flight with a loss of altitude and collided with the water surface. The Russian aircraft didn't use onboard weapons or come into contact with the unmanned aerial vehicle and returned safely to its home airfield. So they're saying they didn't go after it necessarily. And this whole thing is kind of interesting because the U.S. is once again turning this around, saying, I can't believe Russia did this. Why do we have a drone at Russia's border? And several analysts have said that they think that it was working on behalf, of course, of Ukraine, obviously led by the United States, which is a no-brainer, obviously. Duh. But here are some fact versus fiction, right? So the U.S. flew this Reaper drone, and a Reaper drone has really great surveillance. It has great reach. It's much stronger than just any regular drone. It's a very specific drone, and it was over the Black Sea, so close to Russia's border. So they blamed Russia when it crashed, and then CBS did this whole video where they literally created this fictional video showing their version of the events and why the drone fell. And it shows in the video, and I will show you the video, that the Russian jets are armed with missiles, which wasn't the case in reality. and it was dumping fuel before clipping the propeller and then causing it to lose and fall. But what actually happened was different. So I'll show you. Let's watch what actually happened. Let's watch the Russian version, and then we'll watch the US version so you guys get both versions.
Ambassador to the U.S. Anatoly Antonov says Tuesday's incident involving a crashed American surveillance drone in waters off the Crimean coast is a U.S. provocation, as the U.S. drones, planes, and ships have no business being that close to Russian borders. He was summoned to the State Department in Washington over the incident and later gave comments to the press. He also said that the drone stalled after executing sharp maneuvers and that the interceptors did not come into contact with it.
I think this is a real provocation. Most importantly, I believe that American aircraft and ships have nothing to do near the borders of the Russian Federation. Can you imagine that such an aircraft, a drone, suddenly appearing in New York or San Francisco? However, I want to emphasize that the Russian pilots acted very professionally. There was no contact, there were no use of weapons. This drone made a sharp U-turn and crashed.
The drone's last location was reportedly around 60 kilometers southwest of the Crimean port of Sevastopol. The Reaper drone is considered a highly capable weapon, able to carry multiple missiles and bombs, as well as conduct surveillance. Washington accused Moscow of intentionally bringing down the military drone, an allegation which Russia's Ministry of Defense has denied. The U.S. Defense Department was reluctant to clarify when asked whether the drone was armed.
And so what kind of precautions are you be taking going forward? Are you going to have armed accompanying aircraft or and when was this aircraft armed?
So I'm not going to get into the specific profile of this particular aircraft. As you know, the MQ-9 does have the ability to be armed. It was, again, conducting an ISR mission in international airspace, something that we've been doing for some time.
The US has accused Russian jets of downing a drone over the Black Sea in what it described as an unsafe and unprofessional intercept. One of the jets struck the propeller of the drone, so the operators ditched it into the sea. That's according to the US European Command. Now, the Russian jet is believed to be heading towards Crimea when the incident occurred. US officials have said this, and President Joe Biden was informed of the incident on Tuesday morning. The US has summoned the Russian ambassador in Washington to the State Department in relation to the incident, and the Pentagon has said that the drone, it claims the drone was carrying out surveillance, but it hasn't said whether or not the drone was armed. And earlier, the US Air Force issued a statement accusing the Russian aircraft of acting in what it said was a reckless, environmentally unsound and unprofessional manner, accusing the Russian aircraft of incompetence. Now, in a press conference, a Pentagon official insisted the drone was carrying out surveillance in international airspace.
Well, this isn't the first incident of its kind in the area involving the Western military involvement, right?
No, we do know that last October, Ukraine carried out a massive drone attack. I think it was 9 drones that were launched on the Russian Black Sea fleet in the Crimean port city of Sevastopol. And Moscow accused British troops of being involved in that incident. And of course, that led to Russia suspending its involvement in that internationally brokered deal that allowed the grain exports to leave from Ukrainian ports. And last month, Ukraine said that it was reliant on coordinates provided or confirmed by the United States and its allies for the vast majority of its strikes using these advanced US-provided rocket systems. And of course, this cast major doubt on Washington's claims of non-belligerence. The Reaper drones are sometimes known as the Predator B, and they are hunter-killer unmanned aerial vehicles. They're designed for long endurance and high-altitude surveillance. But they've also been described as the most dangerous military drone on Earth, and they're controlled remotely. They're able to carry heavier payloads. And, what we do know is that casts again doubt over the nature of this particular operation. We still don't know what the drone was doing in the area. The US, of course, claims that it was carrying out surveillance, but Russia has, as we heard earlier, broken down and dismissed those claims.
Former Pentagon security policy analyst Michael Maloof says the American drone was likely being used to call the shots for the Ukrainian military.
That drone probably was used to guide and to give assistance to Ukrainians on the ground, puzzled by the damage to a propeller by a Russian jet without the Russian jet sustaining damage. But I haven't heard any reports of any damage to Russian aircraft, if in fact it rammed it. That's the only way that this could have happened. There's still more to the story. The fact that it does show, however, the extent to which the United States is providing assistance to Ukraine without actually putting boots on the ground, but it is in effect assisting as a proxy, seeing Ukraine as a proxy in this conflict against Russia.
Fam, did you have another video that you wanted to show that CBS made up? I don't see it in the
so
doc.
I want to show the other video, but a couple of things I want to say real quick from that. One point that Anatoly Antonov did make that was very valid was, can you imagine if this happened in San Francisco or New York, or another major U.S. city? So turn the tables around. Yet the United States is angry at Russia and is saying that Russia was the one that was instigating, when they have this very aggressive drone. It's not a regular drone, okay? Near Russia, like by Crimea, which we know is part of Russia, and they've been targeting Crimea. The last time there wasn't a drone attack there, it was when they were trying to attack the area, and that's why Russia pulled out of the grain deal, because they didn't feel that they were safe around that area. And so they're turning it around and saying, wow, Russia was really aggressive and they did this and that. But again, guys, why are we there in the first place? What I thought, we weren't fighting a war with Russia. Why? What's going on? What's reconnaissance? So you'd be fine if there was a sort of aircraft, Russian aircraft in San Francisco or in New York or in LA or in Texas. I mean, I'm sure we'd be totally fine with it, right? Or even in Mexico, for crying out loud, like Puerto Rico. Like, it just, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's just ridiculous. So now I want to show what CBS said, because this is okay. So RT is Russian propaganda, right? Okay, so let's listen to what CBS's version of the events are.
Russian jet approached from the rear, dumping fuel. U.S. officials believe it meant to come up in front of the drone so it would fly into the fuel cloud, but pulled up too soon and clipped the drone's propeller, which is located in the rear. The drone's controllers could do nothing but let it glide into the sea. Russian jet approached from the rear, dumping fuel. U.S. officials believe it meant to come up in front of the drone so it would fly into the fuel cloud, but pulled up too soon and clipped the drone's
Look at those
propeller,
missiles on that
which is
Russian
located
jet.
in the rear.
The Russian jet didn't have any missiles. So instead of showing there's no like image of like they're not showing like what actually happened of like the maps or a real picture of, they're showing like that this Russian jet had all these missiles and it just went and attacked this drone. And they're literally creating like, what is like CGI or whatever version of what happened. And this is what people watch. And they're like, oh my God, Russia did what? Like, and I'm just like baffled that this passes as news. That is propaganda. That we would never put out something like that. Here is a recreated version of what we think happened, like blah, 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 blah. And they said U.S. officials believe like this is what happened. But based on what? There's no, like, it's just so.
It's
on Russia's border.
It's so U.S. It's so United
It's so
States.
U.S.
And I don't know, the problem that I have with it is not the fact that the United States pulls this shit and they push out this propaganda. I just have a problem with the way people swallow it, digest it, and actually think it's okay. You know, I had a book signed, my Smedley Butler book, fam, signed from about 10 people at the rally. Not everybody from the rally who spoke at the rally, about 10 people, and I wrote Rage Against the War Machine on it. I was having a conversation with a young man down over here, and he's getting ready to go to college, like I said, but just hearing him justify what was taught, the empire education, the way they condone and they actually justify our foreign policy everywhere. And a lot of young people are actually repeating this nonsense. So I gave him the book, War is a Racket. I said, go ahead, take a look at it. Let me know what you think. Because if you look at it this way, you'll see that the propaganda can manufacture anything they want if they want to get us involved in a war. And they will justify what we do and how we do it when we have no right whatsoever. I mean, you just said it plain and simple. This is in the Black Sea near Crimea. What's a freaking U.S. goddamn surveillance drone doing there in the first place? It shouldn't be over there. It's just looking to cause problems, and probably was providing information for military actions for the Ukrainians on the ground, which is illegal. Now you're participating in a war.
And so you compare, you know, like what CBS does, and you guys aren't allowed to view RT. Every time I retweet, RT and I are both like clearly suppressed. Like you know, I can't get, and Rachel and I talk about this all the time. We post a video and nobody sees it. Like we're still completely suppressed because we have that Russia state affiliated media label. And, you know, I was talking with Manila Chan on Fault Lines earlier, and we were saying, you know, Samantha Power gets to say they support independent media and they support freedom of speech and all of this. And hello, Julian Assange would like a word. And so would literally every journalist that gets called a foreign agent or a Russian asset like we do, while they're mad about other countries protecting themselves from US, literally this type of propaganda, but also the NGOs that fund these opposition groups to overthrow the government. And that, of course, law is modeled after the FARA, which is a U.S. law that came up in 1938. And so it's just kind of like this projection, this rules apply only to you, not to me. And I think, I mean, we know this, but I don't think, Pasta, like you talk about that guy we're talking to, a lot of people, normies, right? The rest of the world, they don't know this. And so it's really obnoxious how we get suppressed and how, you know, you can't watch RT. You can't, some people, when they retweet it, all it says is this is not allowed here, blah, blah, blah. So that's why I have a lot of my RT stuff on, because otherwise you'll never see it. And people have asked me to have it on because sometimes they just can't see it. Right. So, but guys, go on Rumble, go on Odyssey. There's another platform called Gab. There's Get a VPN. Just do whatever you can to really fight back against this like censorship, because there's a reason why they're not allowing you to see, like, you know, what I showed and what we did versus what CBS did. Yeah.
Yeah. By the way, somebody said we are taught USA exceptionalism early and often. Not everyone escapes the brainwash, and it might take some time for them to escape the brainwash. And hopefully we planted a seed over there with that gentleman. He reads Smedley Butler. He understands what's going on. He understands that war is a racket and all wars are bankers' wars. That's what it is. And fam, how dare Russia put Crimea and the Black Sea so close to America's drone? How dare they, fam?
How dare they? Seriously, they need to stop with that. And on that note, I just want to say, I'm going to be really spicy, and say, you know, all the people that are constantly trying to get a rise out of some people by saying, oh my gosh, you're not promoting the Answer Coalition, blah, blah, blah. Two things. I've retweeted them. We had Chuck Modi on, who we disagree with vehemently, and he came on and we promoted the event. I've told people to go to every single rally. In fact, the Rage Against the War Machine Twitter has promoted the event and told people to go. People should go to not just those rallies, to every single rally, but obviously a rally isn't going to be enough. You see what's going on. You see the magnitude of the people that are in charge. And if you're every day on Twitter, just literally focusing on being passive aggressive and like getting back at people, or just being extremely like, oh, why aren't you all talking about this as much? One, people maybe aren't talking about it as much because they got called Nazis and racists and pedophiles and white supremacists for weeks, and their event got trashed, and literally people got kicked out. It was on the brink of collapsing for weeks before, like by the same people that now want promotion. But I like that Rage Against the War Machine was the bigger person or the bigger whatever, and they did promote the Answer Coalition, which is going to have speakers like Mike Preisner and Abby Martin, two people that I really don't necessarily agree with on a lot of things, and have been absolutely, I think I'm still blocked by them for the COVID stuff, right? And simultaneously, there were people at the Rage Against the War Machine that I didn't really like either. But that's irrelevant when we're talking about a nuclear war, when we're talking about this, that our country, first and foremost, is causing. And I'm glad that people like Gabriel Shipton will be speaking. I think Roger Waters might be saying a few words. There'll be some people, speaking, and that's great. Like, I hope more events like this happen, but let's not pretend that there wasn't an attack coming in or a holier than thou. Oh, you're this, you're Nazis, or blah blah blah, and all this stuff. Like, and this is again why the United States can't get shit done and people aren't out uniting in the streets, because I just believe that people causing division are either chaos agents and doing it on purpose or useful idiots. And whatever, you're still causing division, whichever label you fall under, whatever thing you fall under. And I just think it's detrimental to that. There's a lot of hypocrisy to that. And I hope people go to this one as well. I hope it's a big rally. I hope it's bigger than the last one, to be honest. I don't think it will be, just because there was a lot of selection, like, oh, you're this, you're that, with that group. And I think that's just not what we should be at right now in terms of the stakes that the United States is at. And I don't know if you have anything to say about that, but I'm just sick of seeing people literally weeks later still talking about the Rage Against the War Machine rally. How about, like, if everybody focused so much on their hatred of that rally and how people didn't like, because believe me, there are people that spoke there that get accolades all the time that I really, really do not like. Really, really do not like. But you don't see me tweeting about how much I hate them or whatever every 5 seconds, because there are more important things to focus on.
Yeah. I mean, listen, if you're in the area and you can show up, please do show up. I think Yasmin is speaking at it. I'm not sure. I tried to reach out to her, our friend who was in Nicaragua with us, who works for unions and works against racism. And you're absolutely right, fam. Regardless of what's going on. And there's a reason why a lot of the Answer Coalition doesn't, get a lot of people to their events. They start excluding people off the bat, and that's a problem. They shouldn't be doing that. I've seen some videos with some people who work with a lot of these Answer Coalition, and they were calling people anti-vaxxers are there, and there were Proud Boys there, and this is like all bullshit, made up stuff. I didn't sense any Proud Boys there whatsoever. I didn't see any of them. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I had a friend of mine who would know. We have a friend who've been on the show before. She would have spotted them and said, they're there. Like, our friend Corinne, she would have like, no, they're there. They weren't. It was like, it's just ridiculous that they're trashing that. But hey, listen, if you can find it in yourself to put your ego aside and go over to that event, please do so. I'm not going to hold it against you if you don't want to go over there, but I would think that we could just, for the sake of the planet, to try to end nuclear war, if you can go out there and do so, please go out there and support this event. I would even go out there and support Chuck Modi, and I don't agree with a lot of things he says. I don't even understand this whole comment. Like, I don't want to do an event or a rally with somebody who wants to kill me after. Like, what the hell does that even mean? Or they want to hurt me after. What the hell does that even mean? And kind of going to, oh, the Schiller, these people were bad and they fought communists back in the days and yada, yada, yada. Well, there's a lot to that as far as infiltrators within that movement to try to start problems, first of all. And secondly, the two people from the Schiller Institute who spoke, Diane and Jose Vega, you know what I'm saying? They earned a right to get on that stage. Jose's been showing up, getting in the faces of our politicians, left and right, and questioning them. And I know damn well they don't want to hurt anybody after. You know what I'm saying? They want to come together for peace. So it's just ridiculous. They make these kind of correlations and draw these parallels that don't even make sense. To me, it feels like it's coming right from the State Department to repeat that bullshit. But hey, you know what? Let's just put it aside. Let's go. If you're there in the area, March 18th, get over there. to DC.
I put the tweet. I put Rage Against the War Machine's tweet promoting the event and
It's in
at the section. So
let me
we can
pull it
show
up.
that, fam. And then I have one more thing that
Yeah.
might rile some people up in California if you're in California. But
Here it is. Here's
yeah.
their tweet, by the way.
Yeah, Rage Against the War Machine is supporting the anti-war rally in Washington, D.C. on March 18th. Join Answer Coalition, Code Pink, People's Forum, NYC, and many other groups at the White House this Saturday. We don't have to agree on every issue to work together to stop this war. And you know what? Good for them. Good for them for promoting this event. And I think that says a lot about really the where they're at. And by the way, People's Forum in NYC was literally requiring like vaccine passports for people to go into it. And I think, was it Max that said something about it? I don't know.
Yeah.
And there was a People's Forum in LA. And as I went as a journalist, and I didn't get asked anything, but other people who went as guests told me that they did. But the journalists and the speakers weren't asked for it. So it was just really weird, this whole thing. And like, I don't support that. I don't support show me your papers in any way, shape, or form when it comes to COVID stuff, right? I'm absolutely against that. And so is the Sandinista government of Nicaragua. I mean, they weren't really asking for that. I mean, in some cases, like if you needed to go to certain places, yeah, but like it was just, it was just like we've been pretty much open about where we stand and stuff on that. And I don't agree with events asking all this stuff. Like, and so, there's that aspect. There's why you're not going to attract the people that are against that. But, at the end of the day, whatever, it's not about that this time. It's about war. So whatever. Like if you're going to go. And
let's also not forget, fam, too, as well. Not only that shit, and calling people anti-vaxxers and all that bullshit really doesn't help anything. Like to curse them as, oh, they're anti-vaxxers. You're still going to go along with this. You still haven't caught on to this yet. Like the same people who are propagating war all over the planet are the same people who told you to take the shot. Hello, Moderna is an offspin, an offshoot, whatever you want to call it, of fucking DARPA. Get it through your head. I mean, you got this shit wrong. All you need to do is look at the VAERS numbers, those numbers that are 40 times underreported, according to the people who are telling you to look at the VAERS report, which is the CDC. 40 times underreported, have way more, just the numbers itself, have way more deaths and adverse effects than any freaking vaccine in the history of vaccines. Period. And you guys still haven't caught on.
According to the CDC, the vaccines are safe and effective. So
they are, according to safe and effective. And people still making tweets about the mask and shit. Like, I mean, just please, dude, like really get your head out your ass at this fucking point. If you're not going to catch on, you're not going to catch on. But, that is what it is. And I would also like to point out that the Answer Coalition with their list of demands have abolished the CIA from the list of demands. What is that all about? So you have a lot of answers to answer, but once again, we can all agree that nuclear war is not something that any of us want. So please, March 18th, if you get the chance to show up, go over there, say hi to some of our friends, give Chuck Modi a high five, and if
he did share our stuff about Cuba, so thanks to Chuck for that.
No, I like Chuck. I really do. I disagree with him a lot of things, but I do like him personally as a person. I think he means well. I just think he's got the wrong attitude and the wrong idea. But we can agree to disagree. So that's that. Oh, Jesus. I just removed the damn thing. Let me pull it back up. I'm sorry, fam. Go ahead.
Yeah. So just speaking on that, staying on the COVID stuff. So the Pasadena the Pasadena City College is trying to still require these crazy COVID mandates right now for the people working there. And so a friend of ours pretty much wanted to, I think there's still time. If you're in the area or if you're in SoCal, specifically Los Angeles, there's a call to action to stop discrimination against unvaxxed college students. Speak or email the student government to remove vaccine mandate for all students and employees before 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time today. So I think maybe you still have time. That's the as PCC president at Pasadena.eu. Emailed comments will be read out loud. So if you email them a comment that says whatever it says, they'll read it out loud. And you can go to go.boarddocs.com and comment there. And just, a comment that they need to stop. And I'm just going to read a little bit of this. They just made masking optional just starting January 2023, but the vaccine mandate is in full force. It's literally March 2023. But the school is still very much neo-lib, and there are many faculty that are still scared, don't have the facts, and don't care about student freedoms. PCC students that haven't uploaded their vaccine information are barred from enrolling in face-to-face in-person classes starting around August 2021. Maybe they meant 2023. I don't know. It's a barrier to learning. Students, or it started around then. Students get turned away and confused or just give up because of this barrier to enrolling. The faculty union are on board with the vaccine mandates for employees, so there have been medical and religious exemptions in the past for existing employees. However, for new employees, for a time, it was also mandated. It might still be, but would have to contact HR or look at new job. And you can read more about the policy there at pasadena.edu. And they're just starting to discuss stopping the vaccine mandate. And they have this website where you can go and they talk about the numbers. And so basically they're saying that they put these statistics that don't really have aggregate numbers or the percentage, and don't reveal how many positive cases are from the vaccinated or unvaccinated students or staff. And so again, a lot of people are asking questions. So if you do want to sort of, you give them, something to talk about, or give them back, say something, or if you're in the area, if you know what we're talking about here in Pasadena, there's a lot of questions that they haven't been answering. And so I've seen this work in several places, so maybe people can, do something. Todd Jones. So Todd, shout out to Todd Jones. Last year, a member of the public reported to the Board of Trustees, if they remove the vax mandate, their numbers will go up. That was Todd Jones. It's on the video somewhere on Board Docs, Board of Trustees videos. So you could find it there. Some questions to be answered, though they probably won't be answered. 19,890 students have been vaccinated, and 2,322 employees have been vaccinated. Out of how many total? What's the percentage? They basically just want more numbers. Who's getting, what about comorbidities? How many vaccinated have been infected? What's, what are the case numbers, etc. So, what have these measures done basically to curtail the infection rate, right? And we can all guess that they haven't done crap. So I think it's important that a lot of people who are teachers and who are, members of the community are taking action to stop, especially in California, guys. It's not easy in California. Like everybody just went along with that. The neoliberals went along with it. So so it's important. And also which boosters will be continued to be mandated. Okay. Guys, I just can't believe that people are still pushing this at this stage in the game. I mean, I can, but I am just so glad I don't have to deal with any of that. I'm so glad I'm not a student. I'm so glad I'm not in the United States. I mean, yeah.
Interesting. We'll see.
Yeah. So that was that, fams.
Yep.
That was it for me.
All right, guys. That's it for today, guys. We've almost on a 2-hour show over here. Fam, you'll be back when tomorrow on RT?
Today for you, I'll be back in about 9 hours or so.
All right.
I'll be back at 8 a.m. on Moscow time. So 1 a.m.
Yeah.
12 a.m. 12 a.m. your time.
We sprung forward, so you're 7 hours. So if you're 8 o'clock, it's 1 o'clock. So 1 a.m. for us East Coasters, and 10 a.m., 10 p.m. 10 p.m. tonight for all you people on the Pacific Standard Time, if you can. How many hours are you there for, fam?
I'm there for a total of 6 hours.
Right when I wake up, you'll be getting off. So that's good for you. You have fun, fam. I'll watch on the highlights and the replays. We do have a few more Super Race, fam, just to get to really quickly. Thank you so much. War Media says, great pushback on passive-aggressive waste of time. Well done, Fiorella. Geography Pro also, and that was from War Media, by the way. Geography Pro says, people like Modi get their ideas from people like Herbert Marcuse, whether they realize it or not. Look up critical theory in regards to why things are simplified as oppressor versus oppressed without looking at any nuance and repressive tolerance in why censorship and not listening to other ideas is not tolerated. Once you understand the origins of this, you understand why people act the way they do. Thank you so much, Geography Pro, and I will take a look at that. So thank you very much, and thank you to all who went and helped us out with Super 8 contributions, who helped us out with our Patreon. You know, we have GoFundMe's, the whole 9 yards. Well, we don't have any GoFundMe's anymore. I'm sorry, we have no Gifts and Go. We're going to have to probably do a monthly one or something to see if it's okay, and just kind of use that to raise money, because we did get the rug pulled out from underneath us with the whole Cuba trip. But, you know, we'll see what we can do and see if we can fight back against that. Who knows? We'll try to figure something out. Fam, thank you so much. You got anything else going on?
No, I still have a lot of things to do, so I'll be catching up on that. And I work 6 days this week, so it's a lot. But I'm still here. So and Friday we'll be back. So
we got a morning show tomorrow, AM Wake Up. Come check it out. And then I have a Twitter talk at noon Pacific with Mark Fincher. We're going to be going over the old ways that Arizona used to have mail-in ballots to the new ways they have mail-in ballots. That is a Twitter talk. I'll put the link out there today with a little thumbnail I got going on. So we're going to discuss that, because that's common in a couple other states. Nevada's the same way, where they used to have an old way of doing the mail-in system, and now have a new way. And the new way was adapted because of the keeping people safe because of COVID. But what they've done is they've implemented and they've let these rules stay in place, where they have mass mail-outs, in which that's a system built in which the grassroots will never, ever be able to get an election whatsoever. So that's why when you hear Fiorella and Steve and all those people say, we're done with elections, that's the reason why, because our system is so messed up. So let's identify the problem and then fix it, fam. That's it for today. I'm Pastor Jardula.
And I'm Fiorella. Combo out.